meeting for Wednesday, March 14th. Starting with some announcements. First, we'll start with some sad news. Former town administrator Dick Leary passed away on March 11th. And Mr. Leary was joined the town of Brookline in 1960 as what was called back then the executive secretary. And he was in that position until 1985 when we converted to a town administrator. And Mr. Leary was appointed the first town administrator, and he served in that position until 1994. So for a period of 34 years, from 1960 to 1994, he was the administrative head of the town. That's quite remarkable. I can't even imagine. So he was a extraordinary person. He had a 40-year career in public service, and he also helped found the town administrative form of government in Swampscott after his Brookline years. He was a master lecturer at BU's Metropolitan College for 20 years, mentoring new generations of public servants. He was a past president of the Massachusetts Municipal Association, past director and board member of the Brookline Chamber of Commerce, which is the role that I got to know him a little bit. He was also a past president of the Brookline Rotary Club, and in the meantime, he served on many town boards and committees, so even after he stepped down and retired as town administrator, he stayed involved in civic affairs. Quite an extraordinary person, and there'll be visiting hours at the Belle O'Day Funeral Home across from Town Hall this Friday from 3 to 7, and there'll be a funeral mass Saturday the 17th. That's the Saturday at St. Mary of the Assumption Church at 10 a.m. In lieu of flowers, donations in memory of Dick can be made to the Richard Leary Scholarship Fund at Brookline High School. Any other announcements?
Well, no, I'll just comment for one quick minute that I had the honor, really, the pleasure of working with Dick Leary when I was on the school committee. So I guess my first 5 years on the school committee, he was the town administrator. And we were working at that time on the issues of town-school partnership and issues around health insurance, but he was always very measured, very kind, very supportive, and also he knew his stuff. He really did. He knew the town very well. He understood the budget really well. He understood players really well. So he was really, I think a class act. And I was always pleased to see him at various events. He's always stayed so involved in Brookline. And it was nice to see that he was even, I think we saw him a couple of months ago.
Yeah, at a Chamber of Commerce event.
Yeah.
I got to know Mr. Leary in 2014 when I first ran for this board, and he was a wealth of information and certainly wasn't shy about sharing it with me, which I appreciated. But to echo the comments of both Select Person Heller and Select Person Wyszynski, he was a long-time public servant across the state, the Commonwealth, but also here in Brookline, and remained active even after he retired from the town administratorship, and he'll be missed, certainly. I wanted to piggyback a little bit and make another announcement, actually sort of a congratulations to Mr. Kleckner, Ms. Goff, and Mr. Faison. Just this past week, Standard & Poor's reaffirmed our AAA bond rating with a stable outlook, which is the best that any municipality can do, any government entity can do. And not only am I proud as a member of this board that we've been able to maintain that AAA bond rating for my entire time in town government, but I think it's particularly important at this juncture as we look at a potential debt exclusion on this May's ballot. We'll have more information about that later tonight, and have some capital needs going forward. So again, to make connections here, a AAA bond rating saves us on interest payments, reduces the interest on any borrowing we do. So it's incredibly important to make projects more financially feasible, more affordable, and to decrease the burden on the taxpayers of Brookline.
Any other announcements? Then I think we'll dive into our calendar. So first we have a change order for the devotion project. Mr. Quigley.
Good evening.
So this is a change order for $20,027.48.
Correct. It's change order number 19 to the contract between the town of Brookline and Shawmut Design and Construction for their work on the Edward Devotion School. If approved, it consists of 5 items. The first is an increase of approximately $9,200, excuse me, $9,200 for changes to the 1913 building Harvard Street entrance. Existing conditions revealed beams that had to be demolished and lead paint removed prior to a new steel attached along with a new concrete slab. Item number 2 was for added closure plate to the stair stringer at stair number 6 in the amount of $2,400. Item number 3, increase of $687 for added CMU block at either side of the entry to the upper first floor from the top of the upper level garage ramp. Again, this was an unforeseen condition revealed during demolition. Item number 4, increase of $1,060 is to raise the vehicle barrier support posts at garage stairs 6 and 7 to incorporate guardrail fencing. And the final item is an increase of $6,748 for an addition of an overhead fire door auto set system per the request of town officials. So this change order has been discussed and approved by the Building Commission and presented to you for your consideration this evening.
So we're still in budget?
We're still in the budget, yes.
And on time, too, I hope.
Well, I mean, we're according to our schedule, we're on time. It's not to say that there aren't significant schedule challenges we're facing right now, but we're working diligently with the contractor, utility companies, and others to mitigate them.
So we pray for no more snow days?
That would help. But seriously, we are facing some schedule concerns, but we are working to mitigate all of them. So.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Quigley, for keeping this on track, and I'm sure you are politely but forcefully pushing this along as hard as you can.
I like the measured phrases.
Yes.
I detect some code in there.
Yes.
Okay, we ready for a motion? Okay, I'll move that we approve change order 19, increase in the amount of $20,027.48 to the contract with Shawmut Design and Construction connection with the renovations and additions to the Edward Devotion School project. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton. And the chair votes aye. And
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is an extra work order for the DPW retaining wall for $59,468. Mr. Ditto.
Good evening. Just to refresh your memory, last fall we put this contract out for the masonry retaining wall with the wood fence on top of it. The first go around it came in over budget. We took it back and did some value engineering and removed about 430 feet of cedar fence. That work is complete. We actually have a savings of $1,000 within the budget itself, the contract budget, and we have some about $7,000 left in the appropriation. And from the building department site work, there is some money that was made available for us to put towards this extra work order, and that was in the amount of $29,000 and change. So we did delete 430 feet, and I don't know if you've been by there lately, but we've got 350 feet of the fence up already. It looks great. It's a white cedar, 8-foot-high fence. It's going to be around a long time, and we hope you'll approve this extra work order, and as soon as the snow melts, we'll be out there.
So the source of funds is from the building department? Or
There's three sources, actually. There's some left over from the original contract for the masonry wall. There's money left over from the site work associated with the building renovation. And then Erin kicked in some money on her field and fence budget.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, I'll move that we approve the extra work order number 1 for the DPW retaining wall in the amount of $59,468. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectperson Franco?
Aye.
Selectperson Heller?
Aye.
Selectperson Green? Aye. Selectperson Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Okay. And the next is a building department internal transfer of $200,000 from natural gas to school repairs and maintenance. Mr. Simmons.
Good evening. I'm requesting of the board to transfer $200,000 out of gas, natural gas, and put it into repairs and maintenance for school buildings. Although it seems to be a very hard winter, basing it on heating degree days, it's actually a mild winter. It's similar to last winter, and it's about 20% less than the last 2 winters before that. I've looked at the numbers. I've conferred with Austin, and last year I did this transfer towards the end of the year. My problem is if I do it so close to the end of the fiscal year that I can't get this work done in 30 days. So I feel comfortable with this number, and I'd like to get this work done. And most of the work is repair and maintenance and testing that was not budgeted originally in the school department budget that I would like to see done.
Okay.
Well, what would happen what's the worst case scenario? That we'd have to make it up from someplace else? If
There's still a cushion of money of a surplus right now. This is what I felt good right now with, but there still is money remaining, and potentially I could be back here towards the end of the fiscal year.
And have it transferred the other way, you mean?
No. Transferred out of
natural
into there.
gas.
So
I see.
I feel
Okay.
good where I am right now.
More than 200.
Yeah.
We're running ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Okay. I'll move. What am I moving? That we approve the following transfer within the building department appropriation: $200,000 from school natural gas to school repairs and maintenance. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectperson Franco?
Aye.
Selectperson Heller?
Aye.
Selectperson Green? Aye. Selectperson Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Go repair our buildings. Keep them running. Keep them warm. Okay, we have a few temporary licenses, and we have a late addition also.
I don't think you'll find that in your packet, but I can explain it.
Yeah, why don't you?
It was right here.
Do you have it? Well, let me explain that it actually, no, that's different. This is a new request. This is an application, actually, it's from the Leary family, who is having a reception after the funeral on Saturday at the Lars Anderson Auto Museum. So that would be on Saturday, March 17th, 12 to 4 p.m. with all kinds of alcoholic beverages, non-sales. So this involves a an approval for the Lars Anderson Auto Museum. I understand that it was a late breaking, but it's Saturday, so I would encourage the board to approve it, and if you have any conditions associated with that, we'll make sure that we meet those prior to
The
the
date
event.
is March?
It's Saturday, March 17th.
17th from
12 to 4 p.m.
12 to 4, okay. Okay, so I'll move these temporary licenses in omnibus fashion. I'll move that we grant temporary wine and malt beverage license to the Lincoln School PTO for a trivia night event to be held on Saturday, March 17th from 6 to 11 at 19 Kennard Road in the Lincoln School cafeteria. I'll move that we grant a temporary wine and malt beverage non-sales license to the Brookline Educational Foundation for a trivia bee fundraiser to be held on Friday, March 23rd from 6:30 to 10 at 100 Elliott Street, and that's in the Heath School cafeteria. I'll move that we grant a temporary wine and malt beverage non-sales license to Wheelock College for an academic symposium event to be held on Friday, March 23rd from 5:15 to 6:30 at 43 Hawes Street. I'll move that we grant a temporary wine and malt beverage sales license to Art Barn Community Theater for a gala fundraiser to be held on Saturday, March 24th from 6 to 9 at 50 Goddard Avenue, and that's pending police approval. And then I'll move that we grant a permit to serve alcoholic beverage, non-sales, all kinds on town property, Lars Anderson Auto Museum for a nonprofit meeting reception to be held on Tuesday, April 3rd from 5:30 to 9:30, and the police approval has been obtained. So that one does not have pending police approval as a condition. I'll move that we grant a permit to serve alcoholic beverage, non-sales wine on town property to Lars Anderson Auto Museum for a corporate meeting reception to be held on Tuesday, April 10th from 3 to 7 at 15 Newton Street. And lastly, the late application, I'll move that we grant a permit to serve alcoholic beverage. This is a non-sales
Yes,
wine and malt
yes, on town property.
on town property, Lars Anderson Auto Museum, for a reception to be held on Saturday, March 17th from 12 to 4.
And I would condition it upon receipt of a written application, information about safe service, crowd manager certificate, insurance, and police approval.
Is that appropriate?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, on to our calendar. Whoops. We have a couple of police department items. And first is a question of authorizing the filling of vacancies in the police department, a lieutenant and a sergeant. Chief Morgan.
Hi, Mark Morgan, Brookline Police, requesting the authorization of sergeant, promotion of a patrolman to sergeant and a sergeant to lieutenant to fill a vacancy created by retirement. One of the lieutenants last month, and these jobs are also already in our table of organization.
And these are filled via civil service?
Yes, there's already been a civil service test given. We've already hired off the existing list. We have a list that's existing now that we'll move to have people sign the list and start interviews next week and move at some point in the next couple of weeks to make so the candidates put them in front of the board for promotion.
Okay. Any questions for the chief? Yeah.
So is it mostly internal, or will the civil service list allow us to look at candidates in other police departments?
Requirements to take the test is for sergeant and lieutenant, you have to be an existing member of the Brookline Police Department.
Okay. I'll move that we authorize the filling of the lieutenant and sergeant vacancies in the police department. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And we also have 10 additional police officer, one additional police officer position, in addition to the 10 vacancies previously authorized by the Select Board to fill on December 5th.
Okay, so this is kind of complicated. It's a cascading domino effect here. So we had authorization to hire 10 new officers. We've gone through the classes, going to start on April 2nd. We went through the residence list. We have 9 candidates starting the academy in Haverhill on April 2nd. We had authorization to hire 10 additional officers. From that, we went to the veterans and disabled veterans civil service list. Currently, one of the other items here is going to be conditional offers for 8 officers. Based on the civil service law, if someone is currently in the military or actively deployed and they called off the list and they indicate they would like that position, we have to hold the position for them when they get out of the service or come back from the deployment. By them reserving it doesn't mean they have to come here. They can reserve at other locations or other cities and towns, but we still have to hold the job open if the job came up. So we have 3 individuals who have asked for us to hold jobs for them. So with the 8 that we have for conditional office we're going to come to is that they would bring us to a number of 11. So where we have 8 people here, one of those people we wouldn't be able to put forth, but we're holding 3 jobs for people who may or may not come here. So based on the civil service, so I'd like to have authorization for a total of 11 officers, but only 8 that are going to go into this academy on the following item for the conditional office. Yeah.
Well, it just bothers me that, I'm totally in favor of veterans having some preference here, but it seems that some of these people are ready for almost a year.
That's correct. So we have the openings, we have the vacancies. So like I said, some of these candidates look actually pretty good as far as that on here. But we just, it's like a bird in the hand, it's sort of 2 in the bush. I'd rather be able to offer 8 jobs to the people who are, ready, willing, and able to go forward at this point, and then some who may or may not come in the future.
Yeah.
So to do that way, we need the extra authorization for the job.
Yeah. The veterans' preference rules include disabled veterans. Are there some guidelines, parameters to what type of disabilities qualify for the preference?
They're basically, if they've been deemed disabled by the military and they have that designation from the civil service, then we treat them as such. The conditional offer, they still have to go through the psychological, medical evaluation of the town, and if there's any way we couldn't accommodate them based on the disability, then that would be for the medical people to come up with.
So maybe I just kind of lost this in the description. So these individuals that are asking us to hold a place for them would not be able to start with the rest of the class on April 2nd.
That's correct. One, I think, is gets out of the service around August. Another one gets out in September, and another one was just deployed recently for a year's tour of duty overseas.
So what would then happen? I assume that they would still have to go through the academy. Would we put them in?
Excuse me. They would start at the process at the beginning. They'd have to come in and sign the list. They'd have to fill out an application. They'd have to go through a background screening as far as that. They'd have to go through an oral interview. Then we'd come back and ask for an official conditional offer and go forward for the psychological testing, the medical testing, and also the PAT, the physical ability test that they have to pass to get into an academy. Then they would go to an academy.
So all of this, as Selectwoman Heller said, would probably be about a year out.
We have to locate it. One is more than a year. The people who get out in September and August, we still have to do this process and also locate an available academy to train them.
So I'm baffled by this rule because it seems that there must be some time limit on it. I mean, what if somebody was, this is a hypothetical, but what if somebody decided that, they're going to sign up for another 5-year tour, and after that they want to come, and we have to reserve a place that far in advance?
That, I don't have an answer for that, as
Do you
far as...
understand what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying, and there's no guarantee that they'll even come here. Someone could be on the list for another town or city and decide to go there. So it's more of a theoretical process here, that to get the other 8, we have to hold these jobs.
But it encumbers a slot.
I understand. It encumbers a slot, and it's, you know, it's,
And doesn't that increase our overtime obligations?
Well,
How do we fill that slot?
Well, currently, we only have 8, no one's losing a job. We only have 8 candidates that we can put forward at this time. It's not like as far as...
and you have 10 slots.
Out of the 10 slots. So they're not taking a job away from anybody. They would take a job away from, we'd have to go down to 7 to hold 3 spots out of the original 10 authorization. That's why I wanted the extra one, so we can go ahead with the total 8 that are here.
Right.
That are here.
Would you expect to have another vacancy in a year, within the next year, maybe?
Yeah, we currently have 4, and probably 1 officer may be leaving in April, so we may actually have a 5 or 12 officers vacancies coming next month.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one.
Yeah.
Very mysterious.
Very mysterious. However, one of your potential officers is a member of the U.S. Army who's teaching at West Point Russian language. We have a large Russian community here in Brookline. I mean, relatively large. Maybe that's someone we want to really go after. I don't know. I just throw that out because it's interesting that.
Well, Mr. Green, he actually identified his skill set, and he matched up with Brookline, and that was one of the reasons that he did select Brookline. So he's a candidate I think will actually come here as far as that. And we've had some conversations with him, and I believe he's the one that's going to be wrapping up his tour of duty in April. He's also an officer in the U.S. Army too. So, like I said, he looks like a good candidate. Right now, we have to get through our backgrounds and the other testing, but hopefully, as I said, we'll be back here to get a full conditional offer for him.
Sounds like he's worth the wait.
Okay, so all those words for this motion that I'll move that we authorize the filling of one additional police office position in addition to the 10 vacancies previously authorized by the Select Board to fill on December 5th, 2017. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller.
Aye.
Selectperson Green.
Aye.
Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And the last of these personnel items is offering conditional employment to 8 applicants.
That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
So we have, as I previously stated, we have 8 candidates that are ready to go that have been through the background and oral interview process. These conditional office will put them forward to go starting tomorrow for their medical exams, the psychological testing, both the written test and the oral interview, and then also perform the physical ability testing that would make them eligible to attend the Massachusetts Police Academy. And that would be one that we have in Lowell starting on May 21st. Additionally, out of these candidates, we have one gentleman that's a Hispanic male, we have one West Indian male, and also one African-American male.
Didn't get any women applicants at this time?
No, we did not. We had one woman applicant that was in the process, but she didn't follow up as far as filling out the application. And it's all veterans, so as far as our recruitment, it really didn't affect that, even though we did heavily recruit for females.
Did you create a video like the fire department?
We had done the video first, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was, before you were on the board, I guess. Okay, so I'll move.
Can I just say something?
Go ahead.
I applaud you for the diversity of the candidates, despite the fact that there are no women. I mean, that's the next step, but I applaud the department for the outreach and the success of their outreach.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The class is starting on April 2nd. That class is going to Haverhill Gap. Does have a black female as one of the candidates that's going forward.
Okay, so I'll move that we offer conditional employment to the following 8 applicants for positions as police officers. And they are Joseph R. Trehan, Sean Turpin, Sean McGoldrick, Timothy Burke, Kavi Juggernath, Ryan Silman, Juan Pena, Jason Holland. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We have one last personnel item, and this is a question of reserving the 3 full-time permanent police officer positions for the active duty military personnel applicants. And is there any more discussion necessary, or have we beat this one?
Well,
No.
I'm curious about one other thing, sorry. At what level do we have to reserve these positions?
Well, we have to have the vacancies, we have to give them an opportunity to have a job. We're not guaranteeing them a job because they haven't even filled out an application yet, but based on civil service rules, we have to do this, because they've basically looked at, they're giving up an opportunity to be on this current class because they're serving their country overseas, so. Or
These are police officer positions, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I'll move that we authorize reserving 3 full-time permanent police officer positions for the following current active military personnel applicants: James Ladd Jr., Matthew M. Daigle, and Gregory Gresham. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. But don't go anywhere, because we're now going to do your budget.
Budget season.
I'd like to bring Kevin Maskell up from our Public Safety Budget
Sure.
Office.
Okay.
I don't know if you've met Mr. Maskell before. He started in July with Brookline Police and Public Safety. And so he's relatively new to the budget process, as am I. So this is our first rodeo here. So take it easy on us. Kevin, you got my back?
Okay. So why don't you give us the overview of what's happening in the department?
Well, as far as the department's done a lot of training this year. We've also done a lot of youth outreach and community outreach. One of the things we've done is the YPI Youth Police Initiative. It was big as far as the Community Service Division, other people that are involved. It's one of these things we take kids in town who are socioeconomic disadvantaged, maybe on the fringe of going the wrong way. We interact with them, with the police. What we're trying to do is have the police officers, them learn what the police officer are like, break down barriers, but also with the police officers to find out what these kids are about and find out, from their view, how they can be better police officers, how they can reach out, get their perspective from the kids as far as, what they think a good police officer is, and try to, formulate their duties and their daily activities to make the kids happy, and in turn, they're going to learn off the kids. The Police Explorer program is another one. We're taking kids, and we work with one of the sergeants over in B2. It's out of Masson Park High School. We take a couple of kids who are volunteered to be involved in the program over with the Police Explorers, and the work is sort of like a offshoot of the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. It's a kind of formalized program. They have structure. They usually wear like a polo shirt and a khakis. Some of the kids, they encourage them to wear to school. So it's basically trying to steer them at a younger age to opportunities in the police profession for those that are interested in them. Another big thing we've done over the year is the CIT, the Crisis Intervention Team training. We've got a grant money for that for the most part. It was a job that we had Lieutenant Pastor took over along with accreditation. We also become trainers for the all the departments in Norfolk County. It's also, we've got over half our department trained in crisis intervention training. So it's basically, and we also hired a civilian administrative assistant and also a clinician to work with us on full-time under this grant from the DMH and NAMI to do this. So these are big things that we've done with and with outside the budget. It's going pretty well now. We have probably 75 clients that we serve in the community, which means we check on them regularly. Anytime we have any calls at the house, we send a clinician or one of the CIT trained officers to follow up with them. And we also do on a regular basis. We just go by the house, make sure everything's okay, see how they're doing that day, see if they need anything from the police department. So basically getting regular maintenance and any help that they may need. I don't have any questions for me on particular things. I mean, the crime is up a little bit. You know, I think it's up 4%. But violent crime is down. I think it was 7%. We think there's the rise. Overall crime has been trending downwards. At a certain point, you reach a saturation point that we've been going lower and lower for 20 years now. So at some point, just statistically, if you just have a couple of crimes, it's going to make your crimes go up because they're so historically low. But most of them are larcenies, which cause the property crime to go up. We did have a lot of package thefts, and they actually increased in shoplifting as far as a lot of high-end things like razor blades. People go in, they'll steal 20 packs of them to resell or whatever like that. A lot of it may be derived from the opiate epidemic, that people are trying to get quick money, change things off, the package thefts and the shoplifting to fund their habits. So we kind of keep an eye on that, but that basically was the reason for the rise in, just small rise in crime, but we lowered the violent crime and assaults and violent crimes.
Yeah, according to the workload indicators published in the budget book, Part A crimes, I presume those are the larcenies, robberies, breaking, entering, rape, motor vehicle theft, assaults, is down from 855 in the prior year, that's 16, to 686. That's a pretty good. That's a pretty good drop. I also noted that domestic violence investigations is down. So are you saying fewer of those situations?
Well, one of the things we've had to file a mandatory arrest policy. So anybody who's involved with the domestic violence and probable cause, we arrest them. It's one of those crimes that, things with the youth, and we try to not arrest people. We're trying to defer people as far as either the court hearings or getting into treatment, or as far as the kids doing diversionary programs and stuff like that. But as far as domestic violence, is one of the things over the years that we mandate that if you hit another person that's a family member or a domestic partner or a boyfriend, girlfriend, or you will be arrested and get them in the program. It's been proven over the years that you can't let these things linger, as far as that it will enable people who are batterers to continue to batter. So that's, I think, overall the message probably got that we don't have many repeat people, that once the person is arrested, they get in there. The woman or the man gets help as far as in a batterers program themselves, or we get restraining orders for the wives and get them into counseling or whatever we need to do, that we don't have the recidivism that we've seen in the past.
One of your, I think it's related to the crisis intervention training. A couple of weeks ago, after the shooting in Florida, I circulated a video by a father and his autistic child describing how that child felt when the police came into the school looking for the shooter, and described just the trauma that the child felt and how he reacted to it in ways that could be interpreted as threatening or otherwise out of the ordinary. And I knew that we have programs to train officers to deal with situations where you're dealing with autistic children, as well as other people who may present themselves in an unusual way. I'd like to sort of congratulate the department for the type of proactive ways in which they have developed programs to make sure that when police encounter kids on the autism spectrum or kids with psychological issues of some other sort, they are trained to not misinterpret sort of strange behavior as threats, but rather use other techniques to make sure that both they are safe as well as the citizen. So the Parkland shooting illustrates one of the ways in which this is so critically important, that when police go into a situation, that they really be aware of what's really maybe going on with people they encounter. So I applaud that.
Well, thank you. I mean, as far as the CIT, we also do special populations, how to deal with them, including a special sections on autistic children. And one of the things we've done out of the CIT program is we get advanced knowledge so parents can fill out a little bit of background on their particular child, what causes them stress, what's causing them angst, as far as, so as if it's lights and sirens, if you're going there to call, don't do that. If they, if they don't like to be touched, use it, don't make sure you don't touch them. So when officers go on the call, we already have this data available, and it's given to the officers as far as to, when they approach that scene or that person, or look, or even if they're out missing, lost, they know how to handle this person appropriately, and we have a little, intelligence on the individual person before they get there. Thank you.
I have two questions. One is purely housekeeping in nature. I looking at the performance workload indicators and the clearance rate, the estimated clearance rate for Part A crimes, and it appears that the estimate in FY19 is 4%, where in previous years it's been in the neighborhood of 48, 50%. I'm assuming that's a typo.
Yeah, I believe so. We've been high. Usually the national average is like 28% for the clearance rates overall, and we usually get around 36 to 37%.
And my more substantive question is about recreational marijuana. So Lieutenant Cullinane has been a dutiful attendee at the Licensing Review Committee hearing. So we've those members of the committee have heard a lot about procedures and the practical implication of the legalization of recreational marijuana. I'm wondering if there's anything from a budget perspective that this board should pay special attention to in the current fiscal year, or the upcoming fiscal year, FY19, or things that we should anticipate in future fiscal years.
It's a difficult question to answer based on it hasn't rolled out. I don't think we've got, so far, I mean, with the medical marijuana, as far as with Netter, is that we haven't had any, problems that we had sort of anticipated, and we did get good information, before I actually went to Salem. I went to Brockton Dispensary, and I talked to the people out in Northampton, and they had existing ones, and they didn't have any of the problems that we thought we might have. So we kind of had, advanced thing what to expect here, but being in an urban setting right here in Brookline Village, we were still cautious. Based on that, I think the biggest thing was that, NETA seems to be a very professionally run organization. They're very responsive to the police department's, needs as far as when we based on their security policy, and any time we had any incidents down there or close to there, they've been cooperative. We have a detail officer full-time along with their, parking staff. So that was the biggest thing, was the traffic and parking issues here, not other things we had. So it depends as far as where, a recreational marijuana dispensary may be. I think as far as the town bylaw is going to pass on the public consumption goes, Walter, as far as if that's in effect, it's going to help us curtail some of the quality of life issues that may rise of people who are smoking, marijuana out in public. And I think as far as myself, I used to, thought the marijuana aroma actually had a nice sweet smell, and I didn't mind. But now this stuff is highly potent. It smells like skunk, and it's going to, a lot of people are going to be offended by it, especially if it's smoked or people stored in close proximity. So I think that would get more calls to us. So I think by being, upfront with just the recreational marijuana, the committee on the licensing, as far as that, is going to curtail some of that. So I think budget right now, it seems like we should be able to handle any problems.
So do you see, we know NETA is going to be applying for a recreational license, and we can assume, I presume we can assume that their current location is where they would choose to attempt to get a license from us. Maybe this is an unfair question, and you can't answer it now, but do you foresee issues if with a significant increase in traffic, be it pedestrian and or automobile and other traffic going to that site when it converts from, or when recreational is added?
Yes, I think that would be, it is a problem. That's why we've had, the officer there, and also their private security to parking. If they, they double their, they have the same capacity of parking and they double the number of customers or clients or both, whatever, then it's going to cause a problem. And there have to be some remedies in place as far as for that, whether how they operate.
That's I guess it was an unfair question to spring on you, and it's one we'll be facing in detail if and when they do come for a license. And I'm sure the room will be filled with concerned citizens. So that's something to look forward to. There's going to be a few warrant articles that's going to be relating to the police department, so you should be aware of those.
I am.
There's three in particular having to do with military and surveillance equipment, and I know that's been an issue in other municipalities whose police departments have purchased or been given surplus military equipment like tanks and armored vehicles and other.
Submarines.
Excuse me?
Submarines.
Submarines, yeah. It's like
Brookline Reservoir.
Yeah, right. Or Jamaica Pond.
Well, to answer that, we have no surplus military equipment. We have no military equipment. Basically, it's what the nomenclature is. Some things that through those articles I've read, it's police equipment. I mean, as far as soldiers eat hamburgers and drink milk in the mess hall. So does our officers. That make that that they can't have hamburgers and milk because the military eats the same stuff. So there's some of the things in there that that's indicates you can't have night vision equipment. I mean, night vision equipment would be crucial for us to find, an autistic child who may be lost out in the golf course or out in the woods as far as that at night, or Alzheimer's patients. I mean, the things that have dual practical uses, and that for the police and the military. Well, we use our stuff as far as reactive. We're here to provide public safety for the community, to assist the community, and additionally, as far as the chief of police for now. The safety of the officers is paramount right after the safety of the community, but they should basically equal. And then to limit the officers from, batons or shield or helmets just because, that someone deems it something else. That to me would be protective gears of my officers, and I wouldn't want to send them into a hazardous situation without adequate protection.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be useful or helpful, especially as this warrant article comes up, is for you to be able to distinguish between legitimate police use of military surplus as opposed to some of the crazy stuff that some police departments have taken. I mean, armored personnel carriers.
Yeah, like I said, Mr. Green, we don't have any surplus equipment.
Yeah.
Equipment we
Well,
bought.
no, I'm thinking in terms of, in the future, if the opportunity comes up, that, there'd be some clarity as to what is appropriate and what is not. And there may also already be, but.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I've already reached out to the deputies to start, compiling, bullet points on as far as what that we do as a police department. That is, that may have some overlap with the military type equipment. Like I said, as far as ballistic shields, things like that the military uses. The night vision goggles, like I said, are in that article. The hats and batons and shields are in there. Those are some equipment that we would use under certain circumstances. So we're starting to formulate what we need as a police department to keep the community safe. As far as without being military. Our whole thing is basically, even with our special response team, is de-escalate things. Just take a situation and stop it from getting worse, and that's what they do. We had an incident a couple of weeks ago down on St. Paul Street at one of our housing properties, and one of our CIT clients was there. He was barricaded inside. He was bipolar and psychotic, and he was in a really bad episode, and he had a knife, and he was threatening himself and others. And we used these, the the SRT team, who has the ballistic vest, the heavier armor, shields, to get in there and set up a perimeter. So the gentleman, we could start the price negotiation team to speak to him, to talk him down, to come up with strategies. So he couldn't run out and attack somebody. He couldn't run out and attack a neighbor or something like that. So we used it to de-escalate and make that situation, prevent it from getting worse and going on. So there's practical use for these things. If there's no practical use, there's no need for us to have it, and it would be something that we wouldn't have in our supply room or our evidence room or deployed on the street. So, I mean, I'm all for, we're into the community police, we're not into militarization of the police. There's circumstances that require us to use like equipment. And you don't see us roll on the street. We don't have any of these, or ever requested any vehicles or amphibious vehicles or armored vehicles or anything like that. I mean, at one point in time, even our police cars, they had come in with tinted glass, and we told them to take the tint off the glass because we wanted the officers and the police and the community to be able to have, face-to-face interactions. We didn't want them to be shielded behind this dark tinted glass. So that's not the philosophy of the police department. That's not where we're headed. I think what we demonstrated over the years, what we're about, how we want to interact with the public. We want to have good, relations with all our citizens and anybody we encounter. And as far as, not to be hostile, we want to be prepared. That's what it is.
I just want to thank you for continuing to deploy officers at crosswalks. It makes me feel a lot safer to walk in Brookline with your officers out.
Oh, thank you.
So I think as we get closer to town meeting, the topic we just talked about will become a hot one. And I'll be very interested in hearing the petitioners' reasons for bringing this forward, because at least it hasn't been my impression that we've embraced some of the militarization equipment and techniques that we've seen in other communities and in other parts of the country. So it's going to be an interesting conversation and see what problem we're trying to solve.
But, I mean, our police department gets painted with the same brush as, some of the really outrageous departments across the country. And, it just requires that we, carefully explain, what our policies are, what our procedures are, and how they differ from some of the things that people cite as examples of normal police behavior. So that people are educated as to the difference between us and some other department that's in the news for bad reasons. So.
Well, I'd encourage the board to look at. I mean, in that article, one of the things that says that Somerville enacted this in the law. From my research, it looks like there was an executive order issued by the mayor of Somerville, and as far as that document looks a lot different than the articles within this proposed warrant articles there, or the warrant article themselves, the three of them. And I think as far as what Somerville enacted is something that would be workable, or some framework of that we wouldn't be opposed, that we'd be able to get through as a department to work with. So if you have time, and I know the board is involved in the warrant articles and stuff like that, and whether they're going to support it or not, but I think you should take a look at the executive order that was issued, I believe, in October 2017 by Mayor Crichtone of Somerville, and to see how that flows in comparison to these warrant articles that are on the agenda.
Any other questions for the chief?
Could you share that with us, the executive order?
Sure, I'll email it to you. It's a page and a half and it's one paragraph that it talks about the police.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Kevin, you want to ask?
What is your name? Introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Kevin Maskell. I'm the Public Safety Business Manager for the Public Safety Office.
Great. Welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
We saw
Okay.
him a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
All right. Oh, welcome again.
Okay, I'm going to take the override out of order so we can talk about that, and Ms. Stram needs to be out of here. So let's take care of that. So with apologies to Ms. Steinfeld, let's talk about the override. So since we met last time, do you have the blizzard of numbers?
Yes.
3 versions of the blizzards of numbers? Yeah.
And these are the numbers that you sent out by email.
Right, and they were posted on the town website over the weekend. And they are a little different than the numbers we saw last week.
Okay, that's this packet?
Right.
Number 10. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Okay, so the numbers we saw last week
We're going to turn down the light.
had an override of how much, Ms. Goff?
I think, well, last week we had the base proposal.
Right,
Which
right.
had the override, just trying to get this full screen.
6,700,000.
Ooh. Yeah, that's too dark.
I'm not sure I know how to work that. How's that?
I'm sure our TV audience, our vast TV audience,
So the last
I
week's,
can't even see the numbers now.
last week's numbers were approximately $80,000 higher than what you see now.
Right, okay. And what happened is, and this is thanks to Harold Peterson, who was a member of the Override Study Committee,
And a tax assessor.
and on our Board of Assessors. He pointed out, I don't want to call it an error in methodology, but a potential issue in some of the methodology used for new positions being added. So to illustrate the issue that he found, was if a position was added, let's call it for $100,000 in year 1, in year 2, another $2,500 was added, 2.5%. Then in year 3, another 25 and change was added, 2.5% with compound interest. And that was double counting the normal escalation due to Proposition 2.5.
It's a little bit better.
So I asked Ms. Goff and Ms. Dunn from the school department to go through the numbers and scrub out those increments, and that yielded a savings of approximately $80,000. So, and that's the number you see here up on the screen. So, what I'm calling the base proposal is the proposal from last week, which funded a bunch of items from the town, including repair and maintenance of town buildings, half-time geriatric social worker, library facilities position, children's librarian, capital equipment replacement in the DPW department, snow equipment and sidewalk, streets and sidewalks, an aquatics position so we can expand the hours of the pool, and that will bring in some revenue, some additional seasonal staffing in parks and open space to help us maintain and beautify our parks, diversity inclusion training, beefing up our preservation staff to account for some of our new local historic districts and neighborhood conservation districts, and a sustainability position to free up what's currently a half-time planner position, and to elevate the importance of that function within the planning department. And that package yields just over $1 million. Of that $1 million, about $650,000 roughly is going right into town infrastructure. That's buildings, streets, sidewalks, and capital equipment for our Department of Public Works. So most of that, as I said, 65%, roughly 65% of that $1 million, 50 is going into infrastructure. In the base package is approximately $8,242,932 to be exact for the schools, and most of the dollars is going towards increased enrollment, but also a fair amount, $434,000, is going into maintaining and repairing our school buildings. Close to $5 million is salary and increased classroom staff. Some additional dollars, $241,000 is in-district special ed transportation, regular education transportation of $163,000, 504 supplies and services. These are, well, maybe I should ask Mr. Bott to explain, instead of me going through these. I know you did this last week, but sure. Help us out. Help me out.
So 504 supplies and services allow us to meet requirements under IDEA to meet accommodations for students who don't have education plans but qualify for additional assistance.
Yeah, why don't you keep going down
Sure.
the list?
I actually can't read the order of the list from here.
The next is $100,000 for response to intervention programs and practices.
Great. So, thank you. So, the response to intervention dollars is money to pay teachers, replicating a model that we have for student support called our child study teams. But in this, as a response to intervention, it's to create instructional leadership teams. Our child study teams are incredibly effective at problem solving and coming up with ways to support individual students. And we believe that replicating that for the overall instructional work allows us to better and continue our work to improve the ways we differentiate learning for all of our learners. The professional development, equity, and restorative justice is threefold. It's dollars for additional professional development to pay educators for additional professional development time. It's dollars for professional development to begin training staff in restorative practices. And it is money for a position, a senior director of equity, chief equity officer, sort of any sort of way to think about that, somebody who really holds and leads the critically important work of educational equity for us in our schools.
So there's one position in
yes.
this line, and then the rest of it is expanding. It's allowing the professional staff to work another day that's built into the contract.
Yes.
Okay.
The student support staff, guidance, occupational therapy, physical therapy, That is a request that allows us to keep up with, to work towards maintaining staffing ratios in those areas. Guidance, for example, the recommendation is a 1 to 250 district average, and we're not there. And as we continue to grow, we get farther from it. So this allows us to continue working towards achieving those ratios. BISA, that's our secretarial positions, and custodian. These are two positions that we know we need for the BHS expansion when the project is completed, and before the project is completed when the high school is in Old Lincoln. The administrator support staff, this is an additional vice principal that is needed at Lawrence School. As I mentioned at the last meeting, Lawrence School is has an administrator ratio, principal and vice principal, similar to Heath, Lincoln, Runkle, and Driscoll, but Lawrence is the size of Baker, Pierce, Devotion. So this allows us to have the proper number of vice principals. It also includes additional associate dean positions for the high school so that we maintain the ratios that we have for support for students. Program review material. This is in year 2 of the override request for the math program review, the materials from math program review, and then in subsequent years would be funds that would support the ongoing program review in science and social studies, in world language, in English language arts. The financial assistance policy is a request to allow the school committee to fund the financial assistance policy that was passed last year. And do you want me to keep going through the final?
No, because the other items are in the base proposal.
Yes.
are items that, when constructing my proposal, I chose not to include them. Now, just the school committee has the authority and the autonomy to reallocate, and the school committee may not agree with these priorities. I'm certainly not an educator, so is there any the way we've approached overrides in the past is we put a package out to the public, and we make representations to the public. This is how the money is going to be spent. So, do you see any changes to this package if this goes forward? I guess this is Ms. Stram's question.
So thank you, and the school committee did have an initial opportunity to discuss this proposal at our school committee meeting last week, and so thank you for the opportunity to provide you with a report on that discussion. And I will, because I want to be true to the nature of the discussion, I will read a statement that the committee has prepared. So first, we deeply appreciate your partnership and shared commitment to the excellence of our school system and to ensuring that it has the resources necessary to fulfill its mission of every student learning and achieving to their maximum potential. We commend you for your willingness to conduct an override study process led by 2 of your members and to carefully consider and place a request for supplemental funding before the voters on May 8th. Oh, thank you. I can see so much better now.
Yeah.
We also appreciate the breadth of your responsibilities and your commitment to balancing the needs of every member of our community. We get it. So thank you for taking the time to hear our concerns. The school committee's 3-year budget request was the result of many months of careful work and consideration, and the proposal that your board discussed last week represents a reduction of over $2 million from our budget. Our discussion on this topic, which lasted well over an hour, focused on a short list of unfunded or underfunded priorities that included the following: The first is enrollment-related items. The Brookline High School Associate Dean that was left out of FY 2021 is not related to the building project, but it is in fact related to enrollment growth at the high school that will that we expect to incur regardless of when that building comes online. And also budgeting for what we've been calling overmax paras, additional paraprofessionals that would be assigned to classrooms where enrollment expands beyond our maximum guidelines of 22 students in K through 2 classrooms and 25 students in grades 3 through 8. Both of these items are based on educator to student ratios, and most or all school committee members are convinced of their importance. The second is the Brookline High School South Brookline fee-based buses. Many school committee members are concerned about the challenges that students and families face getting to and from Brookline High School and the negative impacts of the current situation. Your discussion last week demonstrated similar concerns among members of the Select Board. And I will also note the support that we've heard from the Transportation Board and also Precinct 16 town meeting members. The final item is paraprofessional pay. This, I think, was the longest part of our discussion last week, and many school committee members expressed a strong desire to include in the multi-year funding request some level of commitment to raising wages for our paraprofessional educators. This isn't about collective bargaining. It's about recognizing a situation that we would like to change and doing something about it. However, finding those funds within the monies contemplated in the current proposal will be very difficult because we also don't want to erode our educator to student ratios, and we are committed to our focus on equity. So on behalf of the school committee and understanding that there weren't any votes taken last week, so I'm doing, as I said, my best to convey my understanding, I bring for your consideration 3 requests. First, that you consider adding at least partial funding of the paraprofessional wage increase request. Second, that you consider fully funding the BHS South Brookline fee-based busing initiative at the reduced level of $132,000, which assumes per student fee of $400. And third, that you include funding for the BHS Associate Dean, as well as the overmax paras, which together have a cost of about $235,000. We also, this morning in the Finance Subcommittee of the School Committee, had a robust conversation about what trade-offs we would need to consider if that funding was not available to us, and I will highlight for you some of the ones that are on the table. And I will say that, you know, again, we haven't had any votes on this issue, but I will note that many of these items represent very challenging trade-offs from the perspective of the school committee, and it will not be hard. It will not be difficult. I'm sorry. It will be difficult for us to determine, you know, how to manage them. So the first potential trade-off is board-certified behavioral analysts, 1 FTE, and these individuals, as we've mentioned before, help to prevent IEPs by helping students with behavioral strategies potentially before they have an IEP. 3 FTEs of instructional coaches, a potential reduction of professional development days, the elimination of the Lesley University graduate student interns that support our 2nd and 3rd grade classrooms, and 1 FTE data analyst. And this individual has received increasing requests for data from a number of our educators and our department heads, and will not be able to provide our schools with the data that they need, in particular to be able to disaggregate data about different groups of students and how different groups of students are achieving or receiving opportunities. And I will note that one of the biggest complaints that we've heard from many of our educators is the fact that there is much data that is collected for the state and otherwise, but they don't have as much of that data that is able to come back to them in a useful form as they would like. And if we don't have the capacity to provide that to them, then we can't be responsive to those requests. So finally, To the extent that these initiatives do not make it back into your package of revenues and allocation to the public schools, I ask that you make clear that should additional revenue become available in FY19, that those funds will go to the town school partnership for division according to the system that is currently in place. So thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you. Well, on the last point, that's what would happen anyway, right?
If there's additional funding.
Right. So we can commit to that. This request added up is, according to my rough calculations, is about $869,000, which would bring the total package to approximately, the override piece of the package to 7.3 roughly. I came prepared to offer a motion on the South Brookline busing proposal. We've received a lot of public feedback. I certainly have. I'm sure the other members have, not only from folks in South Brookline, but especially town meeting members and others right around the high school see this as a not only an equity issue in terms of being able to for kids in an inaccessible part of town to be able to get to the high school, but also a means to reduce the number of car trips to the high school from South Brookline. So I'm prepared to offer a motion that would increase the package, and this is in our package, it's base proposal, it's alternate 3, which is the base proposal plus 2 South Brookline buses at the $400 fee level, which would increase the package by $132,000. While it increases the package by $132,000, the difference between what we saw last week and what we're seeing today is approximately $50,000 for the total package, which, in the big scheme of things, doesn't change the financial picture much at all. And I think, given the public outcry that I've heard, and plus my own sense that this is a problem that perhaps should be solved, I'm prepared to offer that motion.
Yeah, I mean, public outcry, but more importantly, the persuasiveness of that outcry.
Right, of course.
I mean, people, presented us not with, demands that we listen, but, concrete information that, made their case that this was an important expenditure. And also, I'd like to note that the impact on the single-family and condo taxes is, any amount of taxes is bad, but it's not outrageous. It's just a couple dollars more with the 2-bus option.
Yeah, the difference for the median taxpayer single-family home is
$1031 versus $1039.
That's all in, yes. Including the debt exclusion as well.
That includes the debt exclusion.
Oh, okay.
And for condos, it's $341 on the base amount, and $344 with the 2 buses for South Brookline.
Let me say something about the para. It's not that I'm against changing the pay structure. I don't think that should be part of a ballot initiative, because I think that politicizes our pay structure and sets a precedent for putting other pay structures in other parts of the town on the ballot. And that's my own personal reason not to do it. I think, if there could be other monies coming to the schools, and those funds could be used as a source, but I just don't think it should be part of the ballot initiative.
Having sat around the bargaining table a few times over the last 4-ish years that I've been on this board, these negotiations aren't just about giving more compensation. There's a back and forth. And as a matter of policy, I think it is bad practice to make funding available before the conversation has been had. But also, it's possible that the $502,000, I believe it is, won't actually be required due to some of that back and forth, that trade-off that may occur around the bargaining table should an agreement be struck. So I join the chair in saying I'm not against this, but I want to know what the agreement is before I make funding available.
We usually do that with town meeting. When we fund a contract, we list all of the things that it's going for. And I agree with you. I think that, this has been, it may well be fair. I think the school committee is the best judge of that, and the school committee. And so I would say that until we know what the parameters of that contract is, and I agree with Select Person Franco and Chair Wushinsky that we should not put collective bargaining matters on the override. I think that just sets up a very difficult situation for the rest of the town, as well as for the schools in the future. And so that's how I feel about it.
And I agree, and I think that's true, even though it's commendable that the school committee wants to just take action to correct what is viewed as a problem in the pay scale. But the fact that it's commendable doesn't make it the correct decision. So.
Ditto.
You want to say something? Okay, go.
So I've actually got two questions about the South Brookline bus. I hate to do this in a fragmented way. My first question is, has there been during the entire override study committee process, we were talking about a $250 user fee, and now we're up to $400. I haven't seen anything about a calculation and analysis being done about drop-off in desirability of this bus with a higher fee.
Mary Ellen Dunn, Deputy Superintendent. The part of the survey that we did with parents in the community gave a range of fee options, $250, $350, $400. And there was, obviously, people want to pay nothing or less. But the $400 fee range still had enough respondents that they would seriously consider it, considering what they need to go to and what they're realizing their child needs to go through to get to and from school. We did not put in the surveys, I believe, a $600 or $750 fee, which is closer to the actual per seat cost, in the belief that there should be some subsidy on the part of the town to have some offset to that. So the way fee-based busing works is we have to make a decision to run a bus by July 1st. We can't add a bus in September. It's too late because it can take anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months to get a driver in a vehicle. Mm-hmm. And November is too late. So we will know by this spring in terms of registration, whether we're going to, how many buses we're going to run, and we're only going to run buses based on the revenue that we have and the proportion of revenue that we have. So if we have zero response, we're not going to add the bus. We would probably not add the service.
So you think the 25% of respondents that said we're willing to pay $400 is enough to?
Yes.
Okay.
Given the demand that's
Is
there.
that enough to fund 2 buses or just 1?
So the 400 at 132 is for 2 buses, 2 additional buses. If we don't have enough registrations, we won't add a second bus. We'll only add 1 bus and put those funds in a reserve, and be talking to the school committee about reserving those funds and sort of sequestering. My position would be to sequester those so that they are not spent on anything else but this particular program. So that if we do need to add a bus mid-year, and we can work that out with the transportation provider, that those funds would be available mid-year. But it's very difficult to add a bus in the middle of the year. But if we need to, because we have, school starts and people realized, and it's the first year of a program. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, this. So we will make sure that we do enough marketing with high school students. They've been very active in this process with us at the high school, so I imagine we will have some, it will be an easier launch than I've had doing this program in other communities, because the high school students have been very involved and very active with this suggestion.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the idea is that you would have people register in
June.
May or June?
Yes.
June, and have them pay the $400 fee for the year?
Some, all or part of it. Some sort of commitment so that we know they're as serious as we are, and we can make agreements with our bus company.
Right.
So my second question is, in the PTAC memo, this was stated it was going to be a pilot program. And it sounds like, based on your explanation of what would happen if demand didn't meet expectation, you would segment those funds and they would be reserved specifically for transportation needs, busing needs. What's your vision for what would happen if it didn't seem to be worth it to run this bus in year 2, year 3, year 4? I don't imagine that's going to happen, but I just want to play out the argument and see what would happen. Would we not tax up to the levy limit, or what would your recommendation be?
I would probably talk to the committee in terms of leaving that appropriation there. This is round 3 of implementing fee-based busing for me. The politics around fee-based busing is different in every community. But the one thing I hear that's common to all 3 communities is the commitment to transportation, the commitment to public transportation for kids and for students. And I feel like if these funds are raised for this specific purpose, we need to honor that from a community standpoint. And it's not really in our best interest, politically or otherwise, to use these funds in any other way other than they're intended.
Any other questions about?
I have one other
Yep.
question. So the kids who are on free and reduced lunch, I assume would pay nothing.
This school committee's financial assistance policy would be applied, so
Okay.
that policy is more generous than free and reduced lunch. So a family of 5, whether that's 1 adult and 4 kids or 2 adults and 3 kids, making $100,000 would have some relief from that fee of roughly about 25% discount on that fee. So that would be the top end of the families that we would support through that. That would be part of the 175, that the sources of funds would come from that pool to fund transportation, along with every other fee, athletics and
Right.
field trip fees and the like.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So I'll be putting forth a motion that funds alternate 3, which includes the 132,200, and that yields, if if you can put that other slide up. Over 3 years, just the operating piece would be approximately 3.1% increase. The number that would be on the ballot is $6,575,425, which I'll note is okay.
It's less than.
It's less than
what's on the sheet.
2015.
It's less than the 2015 override, which was 7.65 million. But I'll also note that we're identifying two non-tax revenue funding sources. One is some experience with the group insurance commission this year, which is $792,929. And then in year 3, we're committing to finding just over $2 million in other non-tax revenues, which will include a combination of trash fee, parking meter, and or marijuana revenues. Hopefully, a lot of it will be the marijuana revenues, or a good portion of it will be the marijuana revenues. But if that doesn't, if we don't realize those revenues like we anticipate, we believe there's enough capacity in our other sources to make up that number. So the number, you always try to be conservative in budgeting. That's just good practice, and that's why we have a AAA bond rating. So Mr. Kleckner has assured me that we can meet that number.
Correct.
Okay. So also as part of this, why don't you go back to the other slide. 2 weeks ago, I think it was, we voted a budget for the high school. And in that budget was, the total budget was 205.6, which we need to finance somehow. And we're going to be financing.
You have a memo in your packet.
Right.
The last paragraph of the memo outlines the funding for that project.
Okay, so of the 205, $37,400 will be covered with existing borrowing capacity. So that
No, 37 million.
37 million. Yeah.
Okay.
37,400,000. I lopped off a few zeros, which leaves a gap of 168,200,000 that needs to be financed through a debt exclusion override. So there's going to be two questions on the ballot, one for the operating override and the other for the debt exclusion override for the high school. And the debt exclusion override for the high school of 168,200,000 yields over, as it's going to kick in gradually as we borrow incrementally as the project is being completed but in 4 years. It's going to take 4 years for it to kick in, and it will yield a 5.6% increase in taxes. And the median single-family home, which is approximately, $1.2 million in assessed valuation, would yield a $667 increase in taxes due to the debt exclusion override, another $372 for the operating override, for a total of $1,039. So that's what we're putting on the ballot, or that's what this motion would put on the ballot. So,
So you're talking about alternate 3, which is on page 10 point,
right, and is on the town website.
no, I'm sorry, 10 point,
Option B, base proposal +2.
Would use the one you.
no, I didn't get this one today.
Okay, so in terms of a motion,
So you should also have in your packet a memo from the town administrator with proposed votes
Right.
around the various options that
right, and I'm
Selectman
missing
Krasinski,
the memo, or am I?
And, yeah, I agree with the town. I agree with Mr. Kleckner that the more simplified language probably is the safest language to use.
Yeah. And for, both the debt exclusion and the override votes, these votes were run by town council, and for the debt exclusion vote, bond council also reviewed these votes as well.
Right.
We have bond counsel?
Right, because we're going to be borrowing a lot of money. Okay, so should the language of the ballot be in the motion?
So I see this as, your proposal is really a 3-year funding plan that involves more than just an override.
Right.
So I think it's probably appropriate to vote on that, and then we would then turn to the 2 actual votes that will appear on the referendum.
Okay, so the motion will be to adopt as our 3-year funding plan going forward, what is listed
Spending
as...
plan, isn't it?
Excuse me?
Is it spending plan?
Spending and funding plan.
Okay.
So it's to adopt a spending and funding plan described as alternate 3.
Dated March 14th, 2018.
Yes.
In the memo dated March 14th, 2018.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're looking at the same one.
Which, and the title is Alternate 3 Base Proposal plus 2 South Brookline buses with a $400 fee, which is a total funding plan of $9,425,973, of which $8,375,132 is for the schools, various school lines, and then $1,050,841 is for various town lines, to be financed through $792,929 in GIC savings, a tax override of $6,575,425, and non-tax revenue of $2,057,619,019. $19, thank you, for a total of $9,425,973. So
That's the funding plan.
that's the funding plan, right? So now that I've confused everybody and our TV audience, that's the motion. So moved, and all those in favor, please say aye. Select person Franco.
Aye.
Select person Heller.
Aye.
Select person Green.
Aye.
Select person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I will then move, so now I should move the language?
Yes. The board is required, and only the board can authorize referendum questions on the ballot related to Proposition 2.5. So you have 2 proposed questions, one on the override and one on the debt exclusion.
Okay, so I will move the operating override language as follows. Shall the town of Brookline be allowed to assess an additional $6,575,425 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of funding the cost of expenditures in the Brookline schools for $5,873,642, and in municipal departments for $701,783 for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018. So those numbers are add up to that 6.5 number that I stated earlier, and then allocates the override piece between the schools and the town. And remember, there's also the non-tax piece.
Just one correction, and I'm not even sure if it matters, but it's the Brookline Public Schools, not the Brookline Schools. I think you just
I said
omitted a word.
Yeah, right. It's Brookline Public Schools on the printed page. So that's the motion. The public schools of Brookline.
Let me ask a question. In terms of the incremental impact on tax bills, I assume that, of course, you're taking out the personal property tax in making those calculations. Do we know how much that is, though?
So we have a commercial impact, and then a residential, and a single family and a condo impact. That's I worked with Gary McCabe on the calculator that brings us to these numbers.
So is personal property tax included in commercial real estate?
It's a separate category.
Okay, so it's not in
and
here.
It goes into the levy limit.
But do we know how much that is?
I don't have that broken out.
We do, but we don't have it here.
Okay.
I think that's mostly paid by commercial establishments, and if there are, and rental properties, some rental properties can be taxed that. I don't know how it's done.
I don't have the information in front of me, but my recollection is the largest payers of personal property tax are Verizon, National Grid. It's big businesses in town that have
computers and
equipment.
Furniture and all the stuff that's
And
in the
wires.
office.
Wires on poles,
Right.
but not underground, if I recall.
So my question is, just to be clear, the $6,575,425 will be on residential or single-family and condo real estate bills at a lesser amount than that.
A subset.
We're going to raise $6,575,425, and then the assessors have to allocate that the way they always do. They allocate our tax levy based on the relative values.
Right. So a portion will come out of single family, two families, apartments, commercial.
So what will come out for those two categories will be less than $6,575,425.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I think it's important for our vast TV audience to know that.
Right.
The estimates are based on fiscal 18 and the current impacts of the levy on those property classes.
Right. Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and this, by the way, is the simplest override language we could have. There were other gradations that had more words, but this is the shortest and the simplest. So, all those in favor of the language that I read, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And one last vote. And this is for the high school debt exclusion. And the motion is to place the following language on the ballot in the May election. Shall the town of Brookline be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2.5 so-called the amounts required to pay for the bonds issued in order to renovate and expand Brookline High School, including the acquisition and reconstruction of the property located at 111 Cypress Street, and renovations or repairs to Brookline High School, the Evelyn Corain Aquatic Center, the Unified Arts Building, the 66 Tappan Street Gym, and Cypress Field. That's the motion. I will note that there is no number in the motion. We took a very similar motion without a number for the devotion school, but even though there is no number, our promise to the taxpayers of Brookline is the project will cost no more than $205,600,000. That is the project budget. And we have a history and track record of stating what our project budgets are and coming at or below. I rest on that history, and to me, it is a promise to the taxpayers, and we will hold to that number at all costs.
I agree.
Let me ask a naive question. Why don't we put a maximum amount there?
So
it's not allowed.
The DOR guidance does not allow us to put a number on the ballot question.
Well, I think part of it is that we're forecasting bond rates, and we don't really know what the bond rate will be. We do a conservative estimate so that we make sure we cover whatever cost there is, but there are interest rates to be paid. Now, the interest rate, so it's difficult to predict. So I think that from a municipal budgeting standpoint, you really can't.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, unless there's more discussion that's necessary? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
So I want to just go back to the
Yep.
operating override for 1 second, and your comments about a commitment to the taxpayer made me think of something. This chart, which we've been looking at, has a phased-in, phases in the operating override, the tax increase. And in practice with this board's past behavior, we would, I think, make a commitment that we're not going to tax up to the levy limit in year one. We'll do it incrementally as the expenses are incurred, as is detailed on this chart.
Correct. And we have a track record there, too. We did the same thing with the 2015 override, and I would argue that our track record in saying that we are doing what we would do with the override money goes back to every override that we've ever done. The 1994 override, that we still stick to our policies set through that override. The 2008 override, we still stick to those policies. The 2015 override, we're sticking to those policies. And with this override, we will do the same. So, and while we cannot legally commit future boards of selectmen, select boards still have to, or town meetings, it's the intention of this board and of the town administration to go forth as we have in the past and keep our promises.
I'm sorry, I just thought that was an important point to
Right.
make. So.
Right. Okay, so let us begin. Okay, thank you. Next up is the Planning Department budget, and I'm going to turn it over to Select Board Member Franco for a couple of minutes so I can just step out.
So, Ms. Steinfeld, what's going on in the Planning Department?
Thank you very much. Allison Steinfeld, Planning Director. If you'd allow me, I just want to publicly acknowledge and thank the Planning Department staff. I really think the town is privileged to have such an extraordinary group of individuals who are committed and work hard and are skilled at their profession. We've continued, despite our rather significant disappointment relative to the Hancock Village Master Development Plan, we did have a number of significant accomplishments. We continue to meet our regulatory and discretionary responsibilities. We supported the regulation of land use, administered our $1.3 million in community development block grant funds, sought to strengthen and expand the tax base, explored and participated in long-range planning activities, promoted energy efficiency, and supported a diverse housing stock. Some specific accomplishments include the fact that we secured a one-year safe harbor on 40Bs. That was a result of the ZBA and the Planning Department delivering 131 units at the beginning of last year, and the fact that we had an approved housing production plan in place. We're nearing completion of Gateway East and have 5 proposed warrant articles before town meeting this year, which hopefully they will adopt. We undertook the strategic asset plan and the major parcel study. I anticipate that those will be in final form and released by the end of the month. And I would like to expressly thank the board for participating with the planning board in helping to review the major parcel study. That's a specific quote from Cara Bruton. We worked with the building department and the select board during the permitting and construction phases of 700 Washington, the Circle Cinema, and Children's Hospital in the village. We've supported senior housing by working to help commit $2.5 million in town funds toward JCHE, Jewish Community Housing for the Elderly, which has a comprehensive permit to build 62 units of senior housing, virtually all of which will be subsidized. We updated and secured approval of the 5-year climate action plan, and we've worked closely with a host of other municipal departments in addressing recreational marijuana and help prepare 6 warrant articles, which will be before the town meeting. And again, we're looking forward to town meeting support of those. In the upcoming year, we certainly expect to continue our ongoing responsibilities. Some specific projects that we're particularly interested in doing is continuing to work with the building department to address site plan approval. Also, in conjunction with the building department, we're going to be looking at our zoning bylaw, and both those activities have already begun. And we certainly will be building upon the findings of both the strategic asset plan and the major parcel study. As you of course know, I had submitted 3 expansion requests, including 2 requests for additional staffing, one of which is for a preservation planner. Our preservation planning staff, I think, is at capacity. I think that if we secure if there are any additional LHDs or NCDs, we'll have to adjust their focus in terms of the level of support that they provide to the Preservation Commission. I also would like them to be able to have some time to do some proactive planning to protect our architectural and historic heritage. I've been after them for a year to develop a 5-year preservation plan, and they simply don't have the time. In terms of energy planning, I think it's time the town made a commitment to fund an individual who's solely focused on energy. As you of course know, we have a senior regulatory planner, half of whose time is focused on energy and the other half on land use. I think we need a dedicated person, even though obviously our senior planner's done an extraordinary job, and I know Select Person Heller can attest to that.
Definitely.
And we also requested $25,000 for a consultant to undertake a greenhouse gas inventory, and I thank the town administrator for recommending inclusion of that funding in the base budget. So we will continue to work hard for the town, and we will certainly work to further your goals and objectives and those of the town administrator. And that was obviously a very quick overview of the work that we do and plan on doing. So happy to entertain any questions.
So just in following on those 2 expansion requests, as this board knows, but just to sort of connect dots here, we funded, we included the halftime preservation planner and the sustainability position. I'm not sure what the job title is in the override question we just voted. I think I was a strong proponent of both in the override study committee process. So on a personal note, I'm happy they made it into the question.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you all very much for that. And I do think even a halftime preservation plan will make a really big difference.
So I want to go back to, I think it was a year ago town meeting where we approved administrative approval of some planning board matters. How is that working out? Is that reducing the workload on the planning board staff and the planning board itself, or does that continue to be an issue that needs to be followed?
The focus was on signs and facade review, and it's worked very effectively, in part because of the planner, Andy Martineau, who's leaving on Friday, was involved in administering it. It makes a lot of sense. It's relieved the planning board of a lot of unnecessary effort and time. And quite honestly, the planning board's at the point that it's overworked as well. So it worked very well, and it served as a good segue into expanding site plan approval.
So
Thank you.
40Bs. I know that the moratorium is going to come to an end. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. There are only 2 outstanding PELs, project eligibility letters. One has been issued for the Coolidge, which is Chestnut Hill Realty's Waldo Durgan, and the other for 1299 Beacon. I expect both to apply on March 23rd. We will open, as required, we'll open the hearing within 30 days. I expect Chestnut Hill Realty will grant us an extension because of the ongoing work of the Coolidge Corner Committee. In terms of 1299, I don't know. I do know the developer would prefer to build a hotel, but we'll see. Both will be protected, though, even if they give us extensions, since we have not met the 10%.
How close are we? How did we do this year?
Well, this year, right now, literally right now, the ZBA is in the process of approving Babcock Place, which is 45 units. The kicker is, if all of the units, including Babcock, which will be approved in a few weeks, were approved and stayed on, that are currently approved, stayed on the SHI, we'd be over 10%. But a number of projects for various regions are coming off the SHI. 40 Center, we're losing 40 units because it's in litigation. It will not get its building permit in 1 year from comprehensive permit. 1180 Boylston is not getting its permit. That's another 45 units. JCHE is not getting its building permit as we anticipated, and that's 62 units. JCHE had a 2-year funding. They needed 2 years to get their funding. ROSB, Residence South Brookline, that's 161 units that are off. And 21 Crown and Shield, 8 units are off. Again, for various reasons, I anticipate most, if not all, will come back on, but until such time, we're not at 10%.
Well, if we get to 10% before those come back on, are they out of the picture?
They've already, oh no, they'll be incorporated back into the 10%. Right now, most of those are on the SHI, and we're 9.34%. But on March 22nd, thereabouts, they're coming off. They'll eventually come back on, but we'll be below 9%. So it's a floating number.
Mm.
Assuming Pudding Stone in some iteration is approved, will be at 10%. And then when those units come back on, it will expand what I call our safety net. Because in 2022 or so, when the federal census comes out, our SHI will go down. The issue is from now until Pudding Stone is approved. We're really open for business, but there are no pending PELs that we're aware of. And an entity cannot apply for a PEL until it meets with the planning department. That doesn't mean next week we won't have a whole bunch coming in and they will go right away and apply for a PEL, but so right now I'm okay.
I'm glad I asked.
Other questions? I can keep going. But
So the economic development, that's within planning department?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
So I get asked a lot, like, why are there so many empty storefronts in Coolidge Corner? Can you just kind of talk about how long that process kind of takes for something that looks vacant to then have something go in there?
Well, I would refer that specific question to someone in the economic development staff because they've actually done inventories and have a better feel for it. But in general, retail is going through, on a national basis, it's going through a change. But the units, it does fill up. It just can take some time.
It doesn't look as concerning as, is it concerning to you?
No.
Okay.
No. Obviously, we'd like a 0% vacancy, but.
So there was a recent announcement, I think, just a couple of days ago about a change in bike share operators. Wondering if that's going to impact anything in your division, your department, or it's pretty much copacetic and it's just a change in name.
Oh, well, our staff was involved in that.
Right.
Right. So no, we're very happy about it. It's a significant infusion of funding from Blue Cross. Yep. We weren't allowed to release that information, and I think some of you were aware of it. But, oh, no, we're excited about it. And we're going to be expanding within Brookline from 4 stations to 9. Maybe not this year, but plans are already
That's 9 additional.
I'm sorry, yes, exactly.
So we're going to 13.
Right. Yes. So that's very exciting.
And there's a request going to the Transportation Board, I understand, the next couple of weeks, to add stations, one on Lower Beacon Street, I guess near St. Mary's and that area, and the other one in my neighborhood that I'm very excited about, near on Cypress Street, right by Clark Park. So now I can ride to Town Hall.
We'll see even more of you now.
Right. Making it easier for, and that's actually one of the things that's made Hubway successful, or Blue Bikes, I guess they're calling it now, successful in Boston, is they've been expanding. They started in the commercial areas, and they're expanding into the residential neighborhoods. Now because we only had 4 stations, really put them in high traffic commercial areas. So now this gives us an opportunity to start expanding into some of the residential areas, which will really increase the utility of the system. It also allows us to fill in the network, because one of the challenges, we were kind of at the edge of the Hubway network. So if you're riding your bike and you pull up and the Washington Square station is full, then what do? The nearest station is pretty far away, so we'll be able to fill in the network.
Or if there's no station proximate to your destination, that's also a problem.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're apparently going to be losing the one out front of Town Hall. I've been watching that. It seems quite successful.
So that's going down to the T-stop again?
Well, I think that was just temporary for the winter to get it off the streets for the plows.
Right.
Go back to Brookline Village, I think.
Right. Which, makes sense, I guess, having it by a T station.
I'll just comment that I'm excited about the sustainability coordinator. I think it's an important step forward for the town. The Climate Action Committee and Maria Morelli, our staff person, have been working on a revision of the Climate Action Plan, the CAP as we call it, 2018 version. The thing will never be done. You realize it's always going to be in process. Yeah. But because, the science is, as the weather changes, we have to get more aggressive about some of the things we do. But I think it's going to make a big difference, and I'm excited about it. And I think the community of people in this town, and I think there's a large community of people who support our efforts to deal with climate change, are going to be excited about it. So I assume that the other part of the, so you're going from a half-time person now to a full-time person in this field, and I'm assuming that that you're not going to lose that other half-time planner, but you'll be able to use that person on more of the 40Bs and the other activities? Is that the idea?
I think the senior planner will become focused exclusively on regulatory planning, and I would like to see that person work to integrate zoning and preservation more, and to continue our coordination with the building department.
Right. Now, I go to another topic, which is site plan review. I know that Maria Morelli in particular, and perhaps other members of the staff, have been working with the building department staff on the concept of site plan review. Could you talk just a few minutes about where that is?
It's still at the early stages, obviously, but there is a commitment from both building and planning that it's really something that the town of Brookline should engage in. So many communities are involved in site plan approval.
What is that?
There are degrees of site plan approval, but basically it's a consolidation of all the guidelines relative to land use. We'll be incorporating stormwater, trees, and identifying those issues, and to some extent, or to the extent that we can, removing some of it from the planning board and allowing some of the, for want of a better word, the more mundane issues to be approved by staff. So it's a reallocation of resources within clearly defined guidelines established by a whole number of departments, and it certainly won't be building and planning, but certainly DPW. So we're still at the early stages.
So will that require any statutory changes?
By law, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, zoning bylaw changes. I look at it as a sort of consolidation of effort. I think it's hopefully we'll get a better working on a particular project, more coordination from staff, et cetera, and it'll be friendlier to the public, I assume, as well. Because they won't have to jump from one to the other.
Right.
Theoretically, they should be able to have a contact or one or two contacts. And obviously, the reason I'm particularly interested in it is the tree protection piece. I mean, we're going to be, we've incorporated some tree protection provisions in the stormwater bylaw, which you will be, which we will be reviewing and will be going before town meeting. That's only the first step in the process, and we had envisioned that there would be additional protection.
We're folding that in.
And folding it into the site plan review.
Our zoning bylaw is extraordinarily onerous, but not just for the property owner, for the single-family property owner, or for the developer, but for staff. It's very difficult to administer. There is a lot of bouncing back and forth. Some of it we're never going to be able to eliminate because there's so many entities with jurisdiction over land use within the town. But to the extent that we can at least identify the process, identify the town's policies and guidelines, that goes a long way in streamlining the process.
Okay. Have we covered everything that needs to be covered?
And I learned some stuff.
Okay.
We're always available if you have any questions, and we're always happy to answer them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jett had to go downstairs to the advisory committee, so we're going to jump ahead to Mr. McGrody and the veterans budget.
Good evening, everybody.
So what's happening in your department, Mr. McGrody?
We're keeping pretty busy. We're asking for level funding here because we're doing pretty well. Our 115 benefits are a little bit lower. Again, it's a demographics thing for Brookline. The expense of living here is so great that there are people in trouble, but they don't qualify financially because the bar is set basically based on the national standard. What we do then is we roll over and try to get them federal benefits. If we can find a disability for them, and a lot of our older veterans have hearing loss, we can relate back to the service. We can get them a small pension. We also try to get them in the VA healthcare system, and we hand deliver enrollments and kind of guide that through quicker than they may otherwise have. And that way we can usually reduce their medical costs, especially the prescription costs, to a manageable level. So if we can cut their medical costs by $80 a month and we can put $150 in their pocket, it offsets some of their cost of living, especially for people living on a fixed income. So we've been doing a lot of that. Unfortunately, we've been doing a lot of PTSD work in the last few months. I want to make sure that everybody that we have that survived the war survives the peace. And to that end, I'm not a counselor, but I'm a facilitator to get people into the counseling, and I'll also facilitate to move them through the system faster. Right now, it's like a 4 or 6 week wait. If I have to, I'll bring you to West Roxbury to the urgent care, and I'll work through that system to get you the help you need. And I did that about 2 weeks ago with somebody. So this way they can get, instead of waiting 4 to 6 weeks, we can get them an outpatient appointment within about 8 days. And if they need to have some inpatient care, it's immediately available to them. So that's been a busy part of our day. And we're also helping families that are having extraordinary expenses with either home care or assisted living with what's called aid and attendance, which is the most unnecessarily complicated thing that the VA's ever done. But after about 2 years of trial and error, we get a pretty good packet set up so we can guide them through it as expeditiously as possible. So we're keeping busy. And we also have a new assistant. Michelle Early left us. She's an amazing person. I can't thank her enough. She's now working at the Emergency Management Department in Boston, and we originally stole her from the police department where she was doing payroll, so we went over and found a replacement, which was Claudia Leone, and we immediately stole her from the police department, and she's doing a great job also. And Chief O'Leary almost had my truck towed.
Any questions?
I know through your hard work in the past, you've improved relations or gotten on a more familiar basis with folks at the VA. Is that still the case, or have we seen a decrease in attentiveness to Brookline veterans?
No, I got to say across the board, not just to Brookline veterans. The changes in the VA over the last few years since they had the major problem has been phenomenal. I get all my health care through the VA, and I can't tell you how satisfied I am. And most of the veterans I see come back, and they're a little leery when I sign them up, and after they get some of their health care, they come back always with positive results. If there is any blips in the radar, I can usually handle those, and I'm at the VA almost every day now for one thing or another, so they know my face really well, so it moves things along a little faster.
How many veterans do you typically help in like a month?
Kind of in a month. We usually do 3 to 4 a day. Some things are little things. Can you help me get my discharge? Some are significant life events. Discharge takes an hour, half an hour. Significant life events could put 40 hours in my month. So it really depends on what it is. I would say that we see at least 50 to 60 veterans for big and little things and their dependents in the course of a month.
You mentioned when you were first talking that there are limitations to the income guidelines.
Yes.
And I'm wondering whether you have any ideas about what we could be doing to increase those guidelines so that we can incorporate more veterans into the program.
They're set by the State Department of Veteran Services, and they're kind of based on federal guidelines. Again, in a lot of communities, the housing costs are a lot less, so there's more people that can qualify. Brookline, the housing costs are higher, and people here that are in trouble wouldn't be in trouble necessarily in some other communities because their housing costs would be lower. I don't think we can change that at the state level because, again, they're looking geographically across the state. Again, what I try to do at that point is I don't want to say no. Sorry, you just don't qualify. So if one route won't work, we're going to work at another route to get them the help they need. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it just points up an unfairness, really, in the system, that it is more expensive to live in the greater Boston area and Brookline and Newton and all of these places than it is to live in western Massachusetts, in more rural areas. So it seems to me to be a formula that's got a basic unfairness built into it.
I don't disagree with that. Most of the people that receive assistance from us either live in subsidized housing or they have some kind of arrangement where they're living, or they're gaining housing at below the market value. So I don't disagree with that. I mean, I fight the battle often that there are poor people in Brookline too, and they need our help just like in other communities. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what the answer would be to that. Based on, they use a regional model for the whole state, but it is unfair, certainly difficult for our Brookline veterans to obtain 115 benefits that need it. And again, that's why we use federal benefits as much as we do. And even then it's unfair. They'll come in and look at people going into the VA and say, you make too much money to get veterans benefits. I've never seen anyone who was drafted in the Army in Vietnam or Persian Gulf or World War II where they checked their bank account and said, you make too much money to serve your country. But they do it on the flip side at the VA. In which case, again, I go, and it isn't a huge amount of money. We're not talking about massive amounts of money. In which case, I'll go and again look for a service-connected disability, even if it's a small one, because once I get that disability, they're exempt from the financial means test. Some of them will still have to pay co-payments, some are free, but even the co-payments are very reasonable.
Good strategy.
I want to say thank you. I am a dutiful attendant of the Memorial Day celebrations and the Veterans Day celebrations. In addition to your hard work honoring, Congressional Medal of Honor winners who are buried in town or proximate to town and have gone unrecognized for far too long, and doing, bringing forward honor squares for Brookline residents who were killed in past conflicts and wars. You always bring in the next generation, the Brighton ROTC kids, who I think it's really important to bring these young people and make them understand the value of service and sort of bookend the conversation, have the older generation but also the younger generation just coming up. So thank you for involving all parts of the community, all ages of the community.
Thank you. Just on a sad note, the Brighton ROTC program was closed this year, but we're going to work with two of the Boston ROTC programs. I already had their senior NCOs into my office to continue the work that the Brighton cadets did, and hopefully they'll and they do things like the cemeteries with me, and it's a great experience for them. And I remember a few years ago we had one of the last Tuskegee Airmen at the Memorial Day, and I grabbed all the cadets and said, you need to sit with him because you will never have this opportunity again. It was a really neat moment.
Are there any nonprofits that partner with you in town?
We work with a number of agencies. Most of them are government agencies, but we can work with nonprofits when it's applicable. We also, working with the Veterans Post, support a lot of nonprofits for the use of our facility for free. So it's a give and take.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's okay. We covered it. Thank you.
And I think I'm still the wooden bark warden, and I'm happy to do it again when you do your considerations. I have a tape measure in my desk, and Elmore Henderson holds the other end, so we're good to go.
You don't even have to stick around for that, Bill.
We are. I have the dimensions written someplace, too.
How much bark have you measured?
Not a whole lot, but I'm there if you need me.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay. And Swanee Jett, Dr. Jett is still down at the advisory committee, so let's go to the town meeting warrant.
Good evening. The warrant closed last Thursday at noon, and despite some weather, we still had a pretty decent influx of petitioners. We have 36 warrant articles for your consideration here. Aside from the standard first 7 that we have, our annual filings, Wooden Bark, closeout of appropriations, the budget. The next grouping that we have a few related to the Gateway East project, a series of easements and funding required as that project moves forward, and the planning department will be here to talk a lot more about that. Children's Hospital is looking for an easement over their new structure at 24 Brookline Place. We have a preservation restriction at the Reservoir Gatehouse. Select Board Member Heller is very familiar with Article 15, which will be changes to the town's bylaw related to stormwater. A lot of this is the outcome of the tree committee that she was on as well. Planning staff has submitted some further revisions to the sign bylaw. Then we have a series of warrant articles related to marijuana that we spoke about last week. In addition to that, we have a proposal to rename the devotion school. We have another proposal to request special legislation to create a Brookline land bank. We have a couple of senior property tax relief warrant articles. We have a warrant article related to living wage and the reporting requirements around living wage. You spoke with Chief Morgan earlier tonight about 3 warrant articles around police surveillance and militarization. And so I'm sure there'll be a lot of further discussion on that. The Solid Waste Advisory Committee has a proposal to amend the bylaws with regard to sustainable food containers and packaging. The Brookline Justice League has filed a warrant article around non-disclosure agreements. A few town meeting members, advisory committee members, have filed a warrant article, resolution about non-electronic communication, something that we've discussed at length in the past with other warrant articles with a similar goal. And we have a few more resolutions, one about World War I, one about nuclear war, and then the last one is a resolution around the renaming of Washington Street. So all in all, we have 36 warrant articles and a very busy spring in front of us.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging just doing the public hearings. I know the advisory committee is struggling with the schedule, so this is going to be interesting. So it's a total of 36 warrant articles. In my involvement, since I've been involved in town government for the last 18 years, this is the most warrant articles that I've seen. Prior to this, it was probably in the low 30, maybe 32 a few years ago. 34. 34?
Yeah, the Kent Street station, I think, was 34th on that. It was that fall 2016.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember it well.
Yeah, so people have been speculating how many nights. I've learned not to put a number out there.
Well, not only is this the most warrant articles numerically, it's the most substantive warrant articles on a single warrant. So I think we should bring some snacks to town meeting because we're going to be there for a while.
Sleeping bags too.
Maybe we can think of a way to have some consolidated public hearings.
No sleeping bags.
No. I mean, on a serious note, I think it's clearly a lot to deal with in a town meeting, and it's going to be a lot to deal with in the lead up to town meeting. But I think a lot of these articles are worthy conversations and things that we should be talking about and appropriately filed. It's unfortunate at some level that they all ended up on the same warrant, but I welcome the work.
Yeah, and there's some articles here that are really going to have some profound impacts going forward. I'm thinking, the marijuana articles,
the Gateway East articles.
Yeah. I'll be very interested in seeing the land bank debate and listening to the land bank debate. David Lescoyer has been doing a lot of work and research trying to craft a proposal, and it's going to require home rule legislation even if it passes town meeting, and then should it pass town meeting, and then should the legislature grant the home rule petition, we would then have to go to the voters, and the proposal is to impose a transfer tax with a lot of exemptions, including the first, I want to say, 500,000 of value. Lower priced properties wouldn't be affected, and the money would go into a land bank account to be used for a number of purposes, including purchase of land for open space conservation, and I believe in there is schools, and also affordable housing. So it would be a source of funds to beef up our affordable housing stock. So very, very interesting. And then it would only happen. You'd only have to pay it when property is transferred. There is a land bank and a transfer tax, I believe, on Nantucket.
Nantucket.
Yeah, and Mr. Lescoyer has kind of used the Nantucket model as a base and tried to craft it for some of our problems here. So that should be very, very interesting. And then, of course, we have the budget. And the budget typically takes a whole night, or the better part of a whole night. So in addition to all these warrant articles, we have the budget. That's job number one, getting the budget passed. And this year is especially challenging because we'll have an override budget and a non-override budget that we've been talking about during our budget hearings.
And the timing is such that we won't actually be able to get, the outcome of the override will not be known for the combined reports deadline. So the combined reports will have to wait for the supplement pending the outcome of the override vote.
And just the warrant articles and the explanations is what, over 250 pages?
Just the warrant, yeah, just the warrant.
Just the warrant, so we can imagine how thick the combined report is going to be.
Yeah.
So. Add your glasses.
Okay, so why don't we vote the execution of the warrant? So I'll move that we execute the warrant for the May 22nd, 2018 annual town meeting. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green.
Aye.
Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So we have now voted the warrant, and we will now move into our first public hearings on warrant articles, and trying to get a head start on a few of the recurring warrant articles. So the first is the article number 1, the measurers of wood and bark.
Yeah, so this is filed every annual town meeting. Article 20 at the November 2000 special town meeting requires that this be the first article at every annual town meeting. So it authorizes the board to appoint measurers of wood and bark, and that there will be 2 of them. We display who the measurers of wood and bark are in our annual report, and as Bill McGrody mentioned earlier, he has traditionally been one of our measurers of wood and bark.
The first speech I gave at town meeting ever was on that warrant article, which required that this be the first warrant article. That was my penance for joining the advisory committee. And if I recall, Stanley Spiegel was the petitioner. If I recall, I could be wrong.
This is always a popular warrant article.
It's a springboard for a lot of puns. So this is a public hearing. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak on this warrant article.
Give us an acorn of knowledge.
So I see none. I am comfortable moving a recommendation on this warrant article, and my motion would be for favorable action, that we should continue Mr. McGrody's assignment as one of our 2 measures of wooden bark.
Unpaid assignment. I think it's important that.
Right. This doesn't cost us anything.
A paid position.
All those in favor of a favorable action motion, recommendation, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller.
Aye.
Selectperson Green.
Aye.
Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
One down.
By the way, the other
35 to
measure
go.
is Tom Brady, right?
No, Elmon Hendrickson.
Oh, so, I mean, there are actually
And he's-
things that the measure, no,
Yeah, I believe it's Elmon Hendrickson.
Yeah, these are just honorary.
okay.
Right.
Wasn't there a beetle boar type infestation that?
Yeah, that's probably something our tree warden
There is another ceremonial, mainly ceremonial measurer, and that's a fence viewer.
Yeah.
And I
That's
was
Peter Ditto.
Yeah, and I believe Mr. Ditto has been called out a few times to settle some fence disputes. So if anyone out there needs a fence viewer, we have one.
I think the best ceremonial title is the Keeper of Lock and Key.
Right. And the next article is the article number 3, compensating balances, which is another one of our standard articles. Ms. Goff.
So this is also annual authorization that is requested by the treasurer collector to allow her to engage in compensating balance agreements, which essentially are agreements in which the town would maintain a certain level of balance in a bank account, and we would then be entitled to certain services for that as well. Just a couple of corrections. I had been doing some technical corrections with the moderator today, and I don't know that this was in your packet, but selectmen should be select board in the backup here, and then fiscal 19 also should be the year referenced as well. So this warrant article essentially allows the treasurer collector at her discretion to engage in these types of agreements.
Right, and until the real low interest rate environment, we never took advantage of these things. And so I remember when I was chair of admin and finance at advisory, I would speak to this. I would get up. Well, we don't use this, but that has changed recently. And we actually do use this authority to get some services and get a little more bang for the buck for the money that we keep in the bank. So this is a public hearing, and if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak on this warrant article, now's your time. I see none. So I feel comfortable on this one, being that we have voted the same language for the last umpteen years, predating my service to the town, that we vote a favorable action recommendation. All those
On the amended language.
on the amended language.
Yes.
Is the amended language, will that be in the warrant that we're
Yes.
signing?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. It's already been corrected in the actual warrant document.
Okay. And at the end of the evening, for those of you unfamiliar with the process, we will actually be physically signing the warrant. So the actual warrant that goes out to town meeting members will have our sloppy signatures on them.
And posted in, 16 public places.
Right.
In every precinct.
Right.
Cool.
So sign carefully.
Yeah.
I'll make it legible.
Right. All those in favor of a favorable action recommendation On warrant Article 3, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller.
Aye.
Selectperson Green.
Aye.
Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And the last one up tonight is unpaid bills. Do we have any?
So as of right now, we do not have any. We have this article here as a placeholder in case that there are any bills that come in from a prior fiscal year. This is the mechanism that allows us to pay them should they present themselves. But as of right now, we don't have any.
And just as a matter of information, if we have some unpaid bills, and every now and then we do, and it's odd. I've seen a bill come in, $105 that would then have to get town meeting approval, or some very small amount, and it needs a 90% vote of town meeting, which usually happens, but it's a pretty high bar, and these tend to be, well, the advisory committee goes over them with a fine-tooth comb.
And frequently negotiates down the bill.
Right. So there's a real disincentive.
They tend to be connected to, in some way, capital projects. I think they're like
Sometimes utility bills tend to be tricky
Yeah.
for people, metering accounts that, may or may not get lost in the shuffle. But traditionally, we've been meeting with departments at the year end to make sure that they've kind of got their accounts in order and are making sure that they're, contacting their vendors and don't have anything outstanding.
Yeah, the ones I've seen have been, meters that get overlooked, mainly construction projects, or there's some misunderstanding somewhere. They tend to be very unusual and rare occurrences. So I will move no action, right? That's the
Correct.
appropriate,
Yes.
until we have any bills presented to us. So I'll move a no action recommendation. I forgot, this is a public hearing. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak, I see none. Okay, now I'll move the no action recommendation. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller.
Aye.
Selectperson Green.
Aye.
Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
I'm trying to get
So,
an update on.
Yeah, I don't really want to spend too much time here waiting for that.
He'll be back with the marijuana articles, so we could also take his budget when we review those as well.
Okay, why don't we do that?
All right.
Okay, so I think that concludes our business for tonight.
Better enjoy these early nights.
Wow.
it's quicker than I thought.